Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everybody. Welcome to the Spectrum Institute for Teaching and Learning 2026 workshop series. On the occasion of the first International Spectrum of Teaching Styles conference in Greece, this year we have decided to condense the spring workshop to one day this year, so we are celebrating today. We have three presentations. For this, the speakers have around 20 minutes for their presentation, and then we will have 5 minutes to discuss with the audience. So it's my pleasure to introduce the first presentation speaker, Dr. Kelly Simonton from University of Wyoming and Dr. Ioannis Syrmpas from University of Thessaloniki. The title of the presentation is Revisiting International Perspective and Cross-Cultural Comparison of the Spectrum, a 20-year follow-up.
Like Maria said, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone. I'm excited to share some work that we've been collaborating on. As Maria said, Ioannis and I had put in a grant for this idea as a follow-up, but we have several collaborators who have assisted with the concept that we're working on. And so, as you can see in the title, we're really revisiting these international perspectives. I saw that Dr. Cawthron was on the call, so this is an homage to some work that she has done. So I'll share some details here in a second, but you can see my team, or our team, includes myself, Ioannis, Maria, Jamie, Chris, and Shraddha, who I think most of you are on the call today. Kanae and Cawthron argued that in 2003, the question of what is the best way to teach, and it remains a question for many teachers and many teacher educators. Historical evidence suggests that there's likely not a best way to teach, but more so that there are best practices to employ at particular times with the right students in the right context to achieve a specific learning goal. Despite the need for teachers to have knowledge and ability to employ these instructional strategies for student motivation and learning, there continues to be a narrow push of traditional teacher-centered approaches, and this remains true in physical education historically. The same trend has been identified specifically for the spectrum of teaching styles within physical education. This is particularly significant given that the spectrum is sort of viewed as a set of key strategies that can help provide students or teachers with a more variety of accessible strategies called the toolbox that can best help facilitate learning for their students. Understanding the spectrum and PE teachers' ability to master these various styles is essential to reach the goals of physical education, according to many people in this room right now. Being efficient in these skills and having a wide variety of learning abilities in students and a wide variety of learning goals in PE makes it more pressing now more than ever. Previous research has shown that the spectrum components can both productive and reproductive have supported increases in physical learning, cognitive learning, critical thinking, and affective learning behaviors as well. Given the necessity for effective teaching practices and the fact that the spectrum lends itself to many advantages for teachers, it's essential in how teachers may feel about how they're using the strategies and how they're supporting their students. Thus, we need to know how they feel about them and what they think about them, as well as their ability to deliver them. It's important to know, though, however, context and culture can shape these strategies. So Dr. Cawthron wrote in 2005, let's follow up that question of what is the best way to teach with what do teachers do in their classes and why might they choose it? This is in alignment with the principles of training teachers on the spectrum. And those authors believe that teachers' beliefs and their primary mechanisms for deciding what strategies to use and when was a particularly important question to ask across context, hence the international perspective. A teacher may only be as effective as the culture and context that shapes what they value and what they're prompted to use. In addition, PE curriculum and students evolve over time, which may cause trends in these strategies. This could be due to policy, the teaching workforce, the communities that each teacher works in. Therefore, there's a critical need to continue to research this areas as these perceptions and these things continue to evolve over time, as well as teachers' understanding what type of training they receive over generations and decades of different teacher educators as well. So for this particular project, we wanted to sort of do our due diligence in looking at a 20-year follow-up to the work that Kanae and Catherine provided not only in 2003, but the work that they provided in 2005 specific to the international perspectives. So as a takeaway here, the spectrum is likely dictated by the environment and culture, and looking at how cultural differences may dictate how teachers feel about instruction with the spectrum. This will probably be we'll probably hear this slide 3 or 4 times today, so I'll keep it brief. I do think most people on the call know the spectrum of teaching styles provides a framework of instructional strategies that teachers can learn and be optimal in delivering. But the idea is that teachers make certain decisions and students make certain decisions, and based on the learning objective of the task or the particular goal, or even the domain being targeted by the teacher, a particular set of strategies should be used specifically to reach said goals. And so the spectrum provides us that framework of different pathways to reaching that goal. The trick has been, are teachers knowledgeable enough about the different teaching styles when they make the right decisions, and how to employ that toolbox at the right time with students in particular teaching strategy or environments and content. Specific to this study, you've heard me reference 2 specific articles, and that includes the Kanae and Catherine article in 2003, which was focused on US PE teachers. And I bring this article up because this was the development of the Spectrum Use and Belief Survey. The main justification here was we needed to understand why there was such a lack of diversity in teaching styles for reported by teachers, and so capturing those through the teaching styles is one way to do it. In this early work, we found that PE teachers in the US tended to report approximately anywhere from utilizing 3 to 11 styles, but on average stated that they used about 8 of the 11, with the most frequent being A, B, and C. The most common styles that were related, and those were the most common styles related to fun, motivation, and learning for their students, which was the belief set of variables that they had identified for this particular survey, with a little bit of differentiation depending on 1 or 2 of the additional styles. In a follow-up to this, Catherine et al. 2005 took the same approach, but on an international level, with a large sample representing 7 different countries. The main rationale here was that we wanted to understand potential cultural differences. Knowing that teachers and students have different decision-making processes when utilizing the spectrum of teaching styles, it was incumbent to understand how the culture may indicate who has power in particular situations, who makes decisions in particular situations, which may suggest cultural differences, let alone policy and curriculum needs as well. However, they discovered that there tended to be a global trend at the time that they did this, in that styles A, B, and C were dominant. And what they called is a core set of teaching strategies might exist regardless of where we live in the world. Now, there are some discrepancies in some of the teacher versus student-centered perceptions. For example, the trends that go beyond that kind of core teaching practice showed that, for example, 10 teachers in England, for example, in their work, had the most positive perceptions overall and were a little more likely to use both productive and reproductive strategies, whereas in Portugal, at this time of data collection, showed less positive perceptions and tended to report more of the reproductive teaching strategies. England and Canada had the highest rate overall, with Korea and Portugal the lowest rate overall in terms of diversity of use of strategies. But the core beliefs were consistent for the most part related to use and knowledge. However, they did note that it's likely the collectivist and or individualist type of cultures and national curriculum were likely the explainer of some of these differences. In an effort to expand some of the work that they provided, one of the things we did was, if we want to capture some of the variety of teaching styles and how people are using them today, we also wanted to connect that to some of the other variables of importance. And one that's particularly important to my work and the work of some of us on the team was looking at teacher motivation. So in what way would the spectrum of teaching styles be related to, promote, and or hinder a teacher's motivation. And so we utilized a new tool by one of my colleagues, Alex Garn, on teacher motivation using the expectancy value theory. And within this theory, there are 3 teacher motivation variables. If any of you are familiar with EVT, you know expectancy value and cost are kind of the main variables. But these are specific teacher motivations for offering quality instruction and curriculum. So to what degree do teachers believe they have competence and potential for success to offer a quality instruction and curriculum? Value, to what degree do they value quality instruction, and cost, does it take too much time or effort to offer that quality PE? So in hopes of extending this work, also we wanted to look at how these styles might be related to teacher motivation. So I'll give you all a second to look at our research questions here, with the overall purpose of this study to explore cross-cultural perceptions of teaching styles as a 20-year follow-up. All right, so in our study so far, I want to make a note that this data is still ongoing and being collected. We have been working, my team and I have been working on this for about a year to get data collected from in-service current physical education teachers from multiple countries. And it's been pretty difficult, actually. The access to PE teachers right now and helping support them, and while also trying to ask them for surveys, I have seen that's been a very different cultural experience. How we're able to get access to teachers in the US versus Spain versus Greece versus other, Germany, a few countries we haven't been successful in. So this is all preliminary analysis based on what we have so far. We hope to continue to try to collect data in a few countries. But I'll move forward with what we have. So right now we have some data from at least 9 countries. Jamie, don't be mad at me. We combined the UK. I know that the UK is not a country. Multiple countries make up the UK, but we combine them for these purposes. So they're one of 9 cluster groups. On average so far, here's some demographic data. The teachers report about being 42 years old, having about 15 years of teaching experience. You can see some of the contextual differences here between where they teach, what grade spans they teach, with over 91% of the teachers holding PE teaching certification and over 69% of the teachers having advanced degrees beyond the bachelor's degree. In terms of our survey tools that we used, like I said, we used the Cawthron and Clinton survey tool. This included one item that represented the amount of use of the teaching style, and a set of items of 3 that measured the perceived beliefs of the teachers for each style. So if you're not familiar with this tool, it gives you a series of scenarios for styles A through K. And the teacher is meant to read the scenario and then answer the prompts based on their reading of that scenario that describes the teaching style. The real advantage of this is so many countries got back to us and said, hey, my teachers don't know what the teaching styles are, so can they do the survey? Yes, they definitely can, because if they just read the scenario and react and reflect based on the scenario, it helps us get a gauge of where they're at without having to know the language of the teaching styles. In addition, we included the perceived ability item, which has been done in some work with the survey and not done in some of the work. And so there's a single item that also measured their perceived ability within each style, A through K. And then we added a reported intention item. So after they've read the scenario, they've given their beliefs. We did ask them, okay, so you kind of told us if you know it, what you think about it, but what's your intention to use this particular type of teaching in the future too? So we added what we refer to as an intention item. To give you some background here, we did give some background on the analysis. So basic correlations, we did Cronbach's alpha on the 1 multi-item scale, which was beliefs. We then did ANCOVA and MANCOVA by country, looking at different models. So we did specific MANOVAs and ANCOVAs for use, separately from beliefs, separately from abilities, separately from intention. We really had to do that based on our sample size. And then throughout that process, we maintained the covariates of years of teaching and teaching context to account for any variance accounted to from those variables. And then we also ran a regression. So we combined all the country data and we looked at the relationship between those spectrum items and the motivation variables that I mentioned to you earlier. Okay, so looking first at reported use. Looking at this data is a real, there's a lot going on. So just to give you a heads up ahead of time, hopefully I can articulate it. So if I look at this first table, you're going to see these tables for each of the variables that we mentioned. The first one is reported use. So you can see on the left-hand side the countries or regions that we were able to capture in parentheses as the sample size. So you'll notice for the US, the Netherlands, India, Spain, we've got some decent samples there. For some of the other ones, Canada, Colombia, Greece, Turkey, our sample size is quite small. So make a note of that. And we've accounted for those differences. We use specific analysis to account for those extreme sample size differences. But please look at this with caution because of those small sample comparative groups. Okay, so what do I want to show you? I want to show you trends across the use of styles. So you'll see A through K. Anything you see in red is a statistically higher score compared to blue, which would be the comparative group where we saw statistically lower scores. I don't want to go through every single one of these, but I want to just point out some trends to you quickly. You can see that, for example, the US and Canada and the UK tend to report higher scores on what we would consider the reproductive side of the styles. And as we go to the productive side of styles, we tend to see that those countries go down, whereas places like the Netherlands and the India in this particular study are significantly higher compared to where they were at on the reproductive side. I can, if you want, just kind of go through some of those scores. If you're from a particular country, check out where your country lands. But this trend continues into the perceived beliefs variable within our survey as well. However, we see overall a little less differentiation, less styles had statistical differences by region or by country, but those same sort of flips in the countries going from productive to reproductive tend to be the same for perceived use and beliefs. One thing that tells us, and Catherine and Kalina found this too in their previous international work, is there seems to be a pretty significant relationship between perceived use and beliefs, meaning that if I believe a style is important, I'm more likely to use it. So you can see that trend here. Interestingly, I forgot to note styles C, E, and H there were no statistical differences by country or region on those variables. So something to kind of point out there, and that's actually going to come into play a bit later too. Okay, so to the next one, I want to jump in quickly. I've got the squares already up there. The top is the perceived ability item. So for each scale, their report of perceived ability, and then that single item of intention. Again, we're seeing some similar trends where a few of the same countries report high statistically on some of the reproductive styles and then tend to report a little lower on the productive styles. Now, I will say, if you look at India's scores for one example, you can see there's actually quite a bit of balance across the scores. They tend to report fairly high on both sides of the spectrum, or what we would consider the reproductive side and the productive side, whereas a few other countries tend to balance a bit higher on one side or the other. Also, I should have mentioned, we also see that styles A, B, and C, like previous work, have shown to stay fairly high by each country, but we're seeing that in many countries, the high scores are starting to separate, and particularly for styles E and F, those are reporting higher than what we saw 20 years ago. And I've got that in my discussion, that we might see these cultural changes, like, for example, inclusion, using more guided discovery. Those types of strategies are being promoted, I'd say probably more in the last couple decades, and that is being reflective in the high reports in their data. In the regression, I'll be very quick here. We did see that the more of the reproductive styles were predictive of our motivational beliefs. So in the reproductive and productive section, if there was a significant style that predicted motivation beliefs, you can see those here. A, B, C, and E maintained for expectancy, so that competency and value, whereas for the productive styles F and H were significant predictors of teacher motivation. And then of the cost belief, providing inclusion, providing those self and student initiated type of strategies, teachers were perceiving that was going to take more time and cost more. And so it caused them to question if those types of styles were worth it. And I'm speaking from a quantitative perspective. I can't say that's what they were doing, but based on the variable itself, that's kind of what we noticed. So based on what I've been sharing with you so far, we see that there continue to be those global trends for styles A, B, and C. We saw that with the North American countries of US and Canada tend to report more of those teacher-directed and reproductive styles, whereas India and Netherlands tended to report higher in the productive side, both in terms of use, beliefs, ability, and attention. We believe that this data is still preliminary, but those countries that tended to have higher beliefs but maybe less use in a particular area, that might reflect a country that's reporting lack of skill and knowledge and competence. So we can use those charts to kind of see where they compare. Whereas if they wrote higher use but less beliefs in a particular skill, that might reflect a lack of perceived value for that particular teaching strategy. So we have correlation matrix for all of these too, where we can look at those shared relationships. In terms of intention, the couple examples I shared with you earlier is the US is one rate of high ability, but it really wasn't translating to use. They wrote high in their ability, but less in their intention, less in their use. Spain, for example, showed low consistency and perceived ability, which might reflect that lack of use, that lack of statistical difference. So that might be a good example of a country lacking the limited competence of the styles, where the US and India didn't report that particular lack of competence. So we see these continued trends from 20 years ago in terms of A, B, and C, but we're also seeing kind of a spike or leveling of adding styles like E, F, and H in those high report. We see more value for the kind of traditional styles with that expansion, and that's clearly related to teacher motivation. Now, one thing that's interesting, I think, is the relationship between the use of the style and the motivation for teaching could be related to a traditional view of what teaching is. So teaching students teaching teachers the teaching styles, sorry for a clustering of a sentence there, but giving the teachers the teaching styles, if we don't change their perceptions and values about what quality teaching is, that might limit their use of those styles even when they gain competence. There also might be particular national curriculum and teaching evaluations that are in place that limit those use of more productive styles, for example. But if teachers believe, if I'm giving direct instruction, I'm doing my job, I'm highly motivated, we might need to also look at how are we viewing what the concept of what teaching is to get them to use those productive styles. For example, so innovation and innovation within a particular culture is something we need to look at moving forward. I won't spend any time here, but there's definitely future need for trends in context and teaching span and grade clusters that I didn't get to share with you here today. Future research is all of those areas, professional development, the clustering effects. And obviously this data is limited based on the sample of some of our particular countries, but we're going to continue to put in a lot of effort and recruiting to get more teachers involved. And I just want to say thank you to the Spectrum Institute for Teaching Styles, for teaching and learning, for supporting this work, for Ioannis and I, and then the team we've developed so far. And I apologize, I'm a few minutes over, but thank you.
I'd like for you, if possible, to go back to your future steps slide, and I'd like you to talk about your aspirations for the future of this work. Just broadly, what do you think?
Yeah, I'll instead of sharing my screen again, I'll just read some of the bullets I had and quickly reflect on it. I think there needs to continue to be more analysis on how teachers are reporting these use of styles and their ability based on the contextual factors they have. There's likely a need to create some clustering effects for countries that have national curriculum requirements as those compared to those who don't. And what are those requirements? Like we know, Jamie, you've done work here, but we know some countries actually list specific teaching styles in their curriculum and in their teacher evaluation systems. And so how are they being incentivized to use the particular styles? We really don't know that granular comparison, or at least I'm not aware of the work at a large scale like this on separating those. So I think there needs to be more work there. When I think about the US context and how different it is from my time I've spent in Asia or Australia or Europe, it shocked me to see that there still tends to be a global trend of what we consider these core teaching strategies. I know that Dr. Cawthron wrote about that in 2005, and I thought for sure in 2026, like we were going to see that really shift based on all the innovation and advancements, but we haven't seen that. And so I think there needs to be work there too. Why are trends staying the same for the most part? However, when you look at styles E and F in particular, and some of the changes and how those scores by teachers are starting to level up and start to match the A, B, and C styles that we see traditionally dominate, I think that's a really cool sign. So what has caused that for those particular styles? Man, the PEAT programs, what's happening? We know this in the US, and I'm less familiar with PEAT programs and the use of teaching styles, although I know many of you on this call are operating in your programs. Are we doing a sufficient job in promoting these styles to the degree that teachers embed them as their value system for what quality PE is, which I was hinting at with the teacher motivation piece? Like, to me, I was under the assumption we were going to see, or I was hypothesizing in my mind, we were going to see that teachers were going to report, I really like teaching and I'm highly motivated because I use all of these innovative strategies and these reproductive styles. And that was true to a degree, but it was actually true that the more direct, more teacher-centered type of approaches led to that motivation. And I don't think that's a lack of a knowledge and awareness of these strategies. I think it's a lack of how we're defining what is quality PE. Because if I define it as giving instruction to kids and getting them to produce or reproduce what I'm telling them, then yeah, that's going to be the link there. So I don't know. I could go on and on. I think there's like 7,000 things that need to be done. Hopefully, Jamie, you can tackle some of them.
Well, I just wanted to comment back on that. I think two things. Obviously, the semantic minefield does not help. The policy semantic minefield of, in some cases, some policies may say, well, we care a lot about the discovery styles, or we care about that, but actually they're referring to something else, right? So that bleeds into some more complexities. But then coming back to your point about, we know so much about teaching and learning now. Why have we not seen a shift to potentially more student-centered or more student autonomous ways of teaching and learning? Part of me thinks that actually our knowledge of teaching and learning has actually probably elevated our ability to use direct teaching styles or reproductive. And I wonder whether that has been we're more aware of it. And actually our knowledge of teaching and learning has elevated our ability to use reproductive styles. It's something I've been thinking about, but maybe that's a component of it. But I'm right there with you.
Like maybe using those, but making them more engaging for learners.
Maybe,
like being innovative.
maybe more effective. Maybe the way in which we were teaching reproductive styles were once upon a time quite custodial, but now with our knowledge of teaching and learning, we're approaching reproductive styles in much more authentic or impactful ways. Maybe that's an idea.
Yeah.
But then again, that makes it 10 times more complicated as well. So.
Yeah, and in terms of data collection, right? I'll give an anecdote. Kanae, I saw your hand up, but I'll give one anecdote too. Like in the US, for example, in some states, we have this thing called the EdTPA, which is this evaluation system for pre-service teachers. And Dr. Metzler, if any of you know Mike Metzler, wrote about this in the early 2010s. He said the EdTPA, it incentivizes pre-service teachers to be experts in direct teaching. you are incentivized and to show your qualifications to do direct teaching. So at that point, why would I even use indirect instruction? Yeah, you showed it to me in my PEAT program. It's like this novelty thing. If I ever use it, well, that'll be kind of an interesting, fun idea, as opposed to viewing it as, no, these styles have particular moments with specific goals and specific learners. So I think that in the curriculum, in the innovation, in the PEAT programs, like that has to be a more fluent messaging that I don't think we deliver. Sorry, go ahead. Yeah. Kanae, I saw you. I'm sorry.
I think the Nico was first on that.
Okay.
Yeah, do you want to go ahead?
Nikos?
Okay, thank you, Kelly. By the way, I mean my comment was very close to what Jamie actually implied, and also what you mentioned about Metzler guidelines. I mean that kind of system, because we are using and we are really lucky to have that tool developed by Donetta and Pamela. But and of course we we measure the perceptions in different countries, and then we try to analyze them. But one of the most important things, perhaps in this case, is and maybe this is going to be a future project together with what you are doing, is how much, I mean, what kind of guidelines, what kind of instructions do these teachers have in these different countries? And, it plays a great impact. And you mentioned already the example from Metzler's tool.
Yeah.
Hi.
Thank you for your presentation. And I have a methodological questions. So you gathering a lot of different nationals data, but how this sample can represent national sample, because like all the like, because just 20 sample size cannot represent, I think, represent like all national their perspective.
You are right. It cannot and it does not. It does not represent the sample. We have been recruiting for over a year to get support within country to get more teachers involved in a larger sample, but it's been extremely difficult. So yeah, that's a significant limitation to this work is we have what we've been given. The other challenge was we decided to stick with the English version of the survey. In Dr. Cothran's work, they were able to actually go through and get each country that English wasn't a dominant language or the first language, and they did a translation and a back translation for all of those different countries. We were not able to do that with this sample, so also it's limited in that regard. And I'm working with Maria, I'm working with Ioannis, we're working with Shraddha. Like we're actually going to try to do translated versions of the Cothran survey in multiple languages. So we already had it in Greek. We're getting it in Spanish. We're getting it. I think we might get it in German, actually. I think we'll get it in a few languages, which I think will also help with getting the expansion of data.
Thank you.
Yeah, good question. It's been difficult.
I know that.
Just want to have one comment, kind of following that for the presentation. I think when we titled international perspective, I think we just need to be very careful about diversifying that. Like you didn't have any countries from African countries, and then like we have Dr. Bruce Nacker from Botswana in this call right here. Or like when you say Asia, you only have India. Asia is big, right? I think just be mindful about that languages. And then I think Spectrum has a powerful like group of people that's such like coming from everywhere that you can definitely reach out to various people too. But anyway.
Well, thank you, Kelly. Now it's time for the second presentation. The speaker is Dr. Kanae Haneishi from Western Colorado University. And the title of the presentation is Integrating Generative AI with the Spectrum of Teaching Style in Physical Education, Opportunities and Dialogue for the Future of Physical Education. So you can start when you are ready, Kanae.
Thank you, Maria. Hello, everyone. My name is Kanae Haneishi. I am a professor at Western Colorado University, which is little south of where Kelly lives. So my presentation is not about research, but I think I wanted to give this topic to broader audience to think about it as a spectrum teaching style scholars and colleagues, that what we go about this. So, but before we go on, we also are conducting spectrum teaching styles with the scholars from USA and the scholars from Japan, supported by the Spectrum Teaching Style Research Grant. And we have done tons of work from there. And we were just from the scholars from the United States just visited Japan to conduct the workshop and all that. So we are going to present all about that research at the conference in Greece. So this is very different completely different from what the research that we've been doing. So anyway, hello everyone. So today's topic of my presentation is integrating generative AI with spectrum teaching styles in physical education. So before we go on to AI and spectrum teaching styles, let me give you some background of why the topic AI is important to talk about it right now in higher education, education in general. So the recent graduates are struggling at workplace. They say the 50% of them say college did not prepare me to use AI, and the 68% said I now use more need more training on new tech, and then 70% of them said we should have been integrated into the college education. And a little bit more about college student and AI. Most of you might already know about these informations, but just in case. So 92% of undergraduate students have used AI this year. And 88% say they have used AI for assignment assessment, and 65% used AI at least weekly, and then 25% admitted to use it to complete assignment for them, and then 19% admitted to use it to write full essay. So half of them said that AI is the most important skills that they're learning in college. And a little bit about what employer in general said about AI. So employers still said problem solving, which is 90%, communication skills and teamwork are the most important skills. Yet the 67% of employer won't hire candidate without some AI skills. And the AI is eliminating entry-level positions, and the job postings that require AI skills have doubled. And the employer wants graduate who use AI, but also know when not to. So roles that require AI skills pay 20 to 50% higher. So that's like the in general job market in here. And then let's shift the gear into physical education. So why generative AI matters in physical education? AI is a game changer, and the game needs changing. 95% of teachers work overtime, and the 40% of teachers work over 60 hours a week. And the burnout in causing the teachers to leave the professions faster than ever before. Well, speaking to what has been said, this data is mostly from the United States, but this is a trend for some countries, maybe not different from some countries, but that's the trend. So why AI is a PE teacher's new best friend? Because AI can handle the heavy lifting of lesson planning, assessment creation, and even analyzing student data. If any of you are here, a PE teacher, imagine finishing work at a reasonable hour, spending more time with family, or actually having a life outside of school. AI can help you take back your evenings and weekends by automating the admin work that eats up your time. Number 3, by freeing up some time with AI, PE teachers can focus on what they do best, such as engaging students, building the relationship with them, building their skills, making PE teachers, making physical education the best part of their student life the day. With AI as their sidekick, physical education teachers can create up-to-date lessons and programs. And then also, AI is not just a short-lived trend. It is here to stay. And the PE teachers who embrace it will lead the change in transforming PE, physical education. By learning to harness AI now, physical education teacher can be a forward-thinking educator and give students the best possible experience. Little bit more about why generative AI matters in physical education. So AI supports personalized lesson planning, adapting to diverse student abilities and needs in physical education. And AI can reduce teacher workload, like I said, but require ethical use to maintain meaningful student engagement and the learning qualities. And the AI can facilitate inclusive physical education by generating multilingual instructions and adapting activities for students with various abilities and needs. So today's my presentation is I go over what some of the things we can do, and then maybe we can use the longer time for discussion. So here are some examples of how we can integrate AI in spectrum teaching styles. With style A and style B, AI can act as a behind-the-scene tool, supporting teacher or authorities in command and practice styles without replacing the teacher's role. AI can draft step-by-step lesson script before class. AI can generate visual cue cards, or AI can create alternative verbal explanation for same skill. For example, teachers can use Canva AI and then type in, say, create a movement cue card for basketball dribbling using ABC as a movement cues. And then boom, they make it a very appealing, visible, nice cue card, movement card. And then AI also can draft the biomechanically correct skill progression. PE teachers still needs to double check though. And then also AI can help identifying common movement errors. And then also AI can help create age-appropriate task constraints. AI can create individualized practice plan during the style B as well, aligning with the lesson goals, lesson objectives, and tailored to student needs, including adaptations for the diverse learners. AI can generate structured practice tasks for the same skill. AI can produce adaptive practice plans for students with diverse needs, and AI can help PE teachers design goal-oriented reputation. With style C, I think the style C and D, it can help a lot on here too. So with AI, teacher can design clear criteria sheet with performance cues, also maybe common errors to watch for, and the example feedback language that observer can use for the peer assessment. So this is an example of basketball shooting. So here is a movement cues, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then maybe some common errors to watch for. Because maybe if student has no idea what to look for here, and then even the teacher, if they're teaching some sports or physical activities that they are not familiar with, AI can help them to come up with common errors to watch for. And then also some feedback language to explain. Some of especially the younger students have sometimes trouble giving the effective feedback to their peers, the doers. And then so you can provide some example. Here are some of the language that you can use. Bam, bam, bam. And then AI can help for that. And then all this, PE teachers can also create all this in various languages. In the United States, I'm sure that, other countries too, there are more and more PE teachers are teaching a student who speaks various languages at home. And that's it's been very difficult for my student or my former student. So definitely the AI can help that part as well. And then for the observers continuing, so the AI can organize the observers' quick notes into the short summaries. What this means is, let's say observers are taking notes by observing viewers' performance, and then scrambling it just to take a note. But then if you take a picture, put into the AI, say, summarize this note, summarize it beautifully. Or AI can convert notes into the clear criteria-aligned feedback statement. Kind of same thing. And then across multiple attempts, AI can highlight the occurring issues, helping the observer focus feedback on most important corrections rather than listing like every single mistakes or occasional mistake. So result for the reciprocal style C, the feedback with AI, feedback is specific, accurate, and consistent, and the observers can stay focused on task criteria, not personal opinion. And the viewer can receive actionable information they can immediately apply. So the student benefit on using AI with style C is student can gain accurate, actionable feedback, enhanced communication skills, and the improved awareness of performance cues through AI-enhanced style C learning. And style D is kind of similar, but number one is the AI can support self-checking accuracy. So AI can help translate criteria into clear self-checking prompts. And the student can compare that with their performance with Q, and the AI can reinforce what to look for. And then number two, AI can structure student reflection. AI can organize student self-reflect notes. Let's say if they're taking a self-reflection notes, they can kind of organize it into what has done correctly, what needs to improve. So AI can encourage specific criteria-based reflection rather than vague judgment. Number three, AI can identify personal error patterns. So across repeated attempts, AI can highlight frequent errors, consistent strengths. So AI can support students in recognizing patterns over time, not single attempt. So in style D, AI can strengthen student ability to self-check accurately and reflect meaningfully while preserving the independent practice. Okay, and moving on to style E, this is how AI can help in the style E. Number one, AI can support level designs. Like I said, if the teacher are not familiar with certain activity, sports or like games or activities, used to be they have to go online research, Google to kind of vary the levels. AI can help that process much easier. So AI can help the PE teacher generate the multitask levels for the same task, the same skills in much shorter time than used to be. Teachers still need to review, select, and finalize the level. That's the important part as well. Number two, AI can clarify choices for students. AI can help translate task levels into clear, student-friendly description. Students better understand what each level looks like and how to choose a level that matches their readiness. So AI can support informed self-selection, which is a key feature for style E. Number three, AI can prompt equity and inclusion. AI can help teacher anticipate and design adaptive equipment options, modify movement patterns, and then also visual language support. AI can ensure all the students can participate without being singled out. So here are some examples of how AI can be implemented in style E in the basketball shooting. So these are the three levels, and the AI can assist PE teachers in designing a different levels, efficiency, kind of repeating, but ensuring the progression in logical and fair, and then maintaining consistent success in criteria across the level. Moving on to style F. So here are some of the things teachers can do to integrate AI in style F episode. AI can design high quality discovery questions. Especially again, teachers has less content knowledge in this particular activities. AI can help PE teacher draft and define question sequences and then question progress. And then teacher again still needs to review, edit, and select questions that align with the target outcomes. AI can support adaptive questions. AI can suggest alternative follow-up questions if students struggle or advance quickly. And the AI can help the teacher respond flexibly without giving answers. And then also AI can help summarize the student response after discussion. AI can help highlight emerging patterns and the ideas shared by students. And AI can support post-lesson reflection on how concept was discovered. And then this is an example of how AI can be integrated in style F episode in basketball shooting accuracy. And these are some of the guided questions that AI can help. Now moving on to style H. So how AI can help style H? AI can help PE teachers design open-ended questions that invite multiple answers. AI can support idea expansion, suggesting variations or constraints to inspire creativity. And the AI can help organize, reflect on range of student creation solutions. And here are some examples. Let's say teacher asks questions that create as many ways as possible to move across the gym using a ball. And the student can explore rolling, bouncing, carrying, combining those movements to move the ball across the gym. And the AI can assist the PE teacher in offering prompts that expand thinking. And the AI can help the PE teacher in helping students reflect on how their solution differ from others. So these are some of the practical example that how AI can integrate into the different spectrum teaching styles. Now I'm going to shift the gear a little bit about here. And what can Spectrum Institute of Teaching Learning or Spectrum Scholar do to help PE teachers to integrate AI in their spectrum teaching episode? I'm sure there are more ideas, and here are some of my ideas, and we can kind of have a dialogue after that as well. The biggest things is one of the most valuable contribution that we could make is the prompt support. So as you might already know, with AI, if you put the garbage in, you're gonna get the garbage out. So putting in the effective prompts is very important to get the better answer. So especially many PE teachers may have a limited experience with AI, and then maybe some PE teachers don't know how to phrase prompts, and then maybe some PE teachers worry about AI taking over their instruction. So I think we can help on that. And these are the examples, some style-specific prompts examples are here. The next things that we might be able to do is some AI plus spectrum educational professional development. So for example, we can embed short AI integration segment inside of existing style module that we have online. Or we can have, we can show where AI fits and where it does not fit in each style in the practical way at the workshop, such as this. So here, these are examples. Let's say a style C module we have online, at the Spectrum teaching style online. We could include a short section like using AI to support observer role or something. Or style F module, you could include AI-assisted questions designed for this guided discovery. These are some ideas that we can do some we can support PE teachers through professional development. And then last idea I had was that the research perspective that we are going to do some research examining the AI integration within the specific teaching styles and how it affects on student learning, student experience, or their decision-making changes, or like student and teacher, their perspective on those. So these are some ideas how we spectrum teaching style, spectrum institution teaching and learning, or spectrum scholars can help PE teachers by doing this. Before we opening up into the open dialogue, I wanna also talk a little bit about ethical considerations as well. So AI system reflect underlying data and assumption requiring critical PE teachers oversight for fairness and transparency. AI can support culturally responsible teaching, but must address inequitable access and a data bias to prevent disparity. So responsible use, disclosure, and the human-centered design ensure AI enhances learning while preserving that dignity and trust. So here are my disclosure on the differences of this presentation. And I like to open up to the discussion with everyone about integrating AI in spectrum teaching styles. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kanae. Very interesting presentation. So anybody have any question or suggestion? Nikos, yes?
Yes, I have a question, and it's quite general. Thank you, Kanae, for this presentation. I think with this presentation, many understand the impact that the use of AI can have in and how much AI can help. However, there are some risks or second thoughts, and one of the things you provide progress in technology, it doesn't necessarily mean that you are saving time from your life or free time. It usually means that you are intensifying your work, and actually AI does that. I mean, you can do more in less time, but what happens with the time, with the spare time that we have then? What do you think?
Yes, thank you. I think that's everyone's question. So what we want PE teacher, what we are hoping for PE teachers, what they do with their spare time is to spend those times is what something that AI cannot do, which is to talking to the student, developing a relationship, get to know them. So right now, at least in the United States around me, PE teachers are very busy doing more admin work or lesson planning, assessment things, data things that they have a limited time for. Actually, it's very important that the technology cannot do. So talking to students, what's going on in their life, and they get to know them. So by using technology like AI, the PE teachers, that's what they do the best too. So they can spend the spare time is what they do for what they do best, and what's actually very important that technology cannot replace.
Okay, and the second little question, if I may, by asking AI platform to provide us with prompts, I mean, they can do it excellent. And maybe it saves you time and it helps you a lot as a teacher. But at the same time, you need to think about this. We are disengaging little by little with all these cognitive processes. I mean, using our own brains to produce these prompts that could be so much related with our students. What do you think about this?
Definitely, that's the biggest concern among the college, university faculty members, reducing the opportunity for students to critically think. The critical thinking part is the biggest concern from the faculty members in general. I think it's I think it's a balance that they need to still learning for the college student. So for the college student, and until they know how to do it, they shouldn't be using AI. So like I'm talking, this one is more for PE teachers, assuming that they did all this college work, they learned how to critically think, and then in the workplace, let's make it a little bit easier for them so they can spend more time with students or their families. But it's very important for those of us who work at universities not to introduce how to use AI right away. I think we have to teach how to do it, how to critically think first, and then teach how to use AI ethically and correctly. Now, how to review what AI gives to you. Is it right, correct, or not? Because AI is not always accurate either. But if you don't have the ability to critically think, or if you actually don't have a content knowledge, they may not be able to review and then correct, gather the errors.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kanae.
Other question? No? Okay, so go to the next presentation. The title is Exploring and Advancing the Spectrum Through Service and Research, Reflection, Progress and Challenge. And the speaker is Dr. Jamie Brunsdon from University of Memphis. So please, when you are ready, Jamie.
So, all right. Last but not least, my name's Jamie Brunsdon, assistant professor at the University of Memphis. As always, great to be with my Spectrum community. Really glad to be here. I'm going to be talking a little bit about this title, Exploring and Advancing the Spectrum Through Research and Service, placing emphasis on some reflections, progress, and challenges that I've been working through over the course of a kind of a project that I've been working on that's being funded by the Spectrum Institute. So first things first, it's important to acknowledge that the first two speakers, Kelly and Kanae, were talking about topics that were pretty complex. Not easy to be doing this kind of work. Revisiting 20 years of research, what is happening? How have we improved? If anything has changed. I'm a part of that team, so I know how kind of complex that work has been. But also Kanae's work, which I think is really important. How do we understand the advancements in technology and leverage that for the sake of, improving what we can do, whilst also not compromising our humanity at the same time. So I really appreciate that work. This is a bit of a non-traditional presentation for me. Usually I'm giving very kind of theoretical or very kind of scholarly, kind of very technical presentations. This is not. I'm going to give you some context into a Spectrum project that I'm currently working on, and then going to kind of review some agency and reflections over the course of 1 year's worth of progress out of 3 years. I'll share some progress and challenges as it's related to that, and then hopefully we can explore some next steps, and the folks on the call can help me with this. So here's some context for the project that I'm working on. I know there's a lot of information here, so I'll try and break this down. So the purpose of the project that I'm working on is to explore and advance the future of the spectrum from an intercontinental perspective through an emphasis on two areas: service and research. It's not your prototypical research project. It's more of an emphasis on how can we elevate the spectrum through two areas. If we look at service, for example, the focus is really to identify, educate, and support the next generation of spectrum advocates through graduate level special interest groups, or a special interest group specifically designed for graduate students. And the rationale here is if we hope to really build upon the seminal efforts of Mostyn and Ashworth, as well as the many spectrum advocates that have followed, we need to expand the reach. We need to learn more about educational practices globally, regionally, locally. We also need to kind of build in the community. So much of what we do related to this work is grounded primarily within 2 continents and maybe a third in Australia, Europe, and North America. But so much potential for good work outside of those areas. So we need to learn about what's going on. So the idea was to potentially work toward the development of a Spectrum International Graduate Student Alliance. Hopefully we provide educative opportunities via lectures, seminars, collaborations, research connections that all together explore and advance the spectrum. You'll notice here too, I propose the idea of doing what I'm calling a spectrum walk. To the best of my knowledge, I don't know if there's been a convening or a meeting of graduate students or future practitioners of the spectrum, for example, that have come together to a particular area where they essentially walk through a series of schools and they see or identify the spectrum alive, be it via what teaching styles are occurring within particular schools, via teachers that have been trained or introduced to the spectrum, or teachers that have not been introduced to the spectrum. And the idea with that is that it could potentially lead to some sort of journal special issue where graduate students are given a forum to kind of write about their experiences within the spectrum, learning about the spectrum and embodying that in different contexts, or potentially an edited book within the context of that. On the flip side of this, so this is very service oriented, I did prioritize a kind of a research element within this as well. And so as people know, I'm interested in diving into the philosophy and theory of the spectrum, among other areas. So for me, it was about exploring and kind of writing about the conceptual and practical futures of the spectrum and uncovering how the spectrum can potentially evolve into a new position, subsequently advancing its place in modern schools. The biggest rationale here is this. At least this is how I understand it. The spectrum's creative strength and weakness is linked to its theoretical broadness, as well as its ability to connect to a plurality of educational aims and objectives. So if we can explore the theory play with the theory in ways which makes it more relevant to potentially local contexts, then it might be of more use to schools and universities and gain more prominence. And as we can see, there's lots of different areas which we can, I think, grapple with the theory of the spectrum. I think so much in recent history so much time has been dedicated to the empirical study of the spectrum, which is valuable and really important in a data-driven age. But I also think we need to give ourselves some grace to play with the theory and explore. And as you can see by this arrow, people will know I'm really interested in the moral component of the spectrum. And hopefully that will lead to practitioner papers, but also conceptual papers moving forward. So that's the kind of the context with which I'm working in. Let's kind of explore some agency and some reflections over the course of a year. So in terms of service, again, for me, I think expanding and harmonizing the Spectrum Institute's community of practice seems to be the most needed approach in order to kind of fostering spectrum futures. I will say it's not the most technically accessible or logical approach to do that because it comes with a variety of challenges. Potentially there was a level of naivety too when I proposed this, and I'm completely okay with acknowledging that. So it was an ambitious challenge. That was the term that was used by the Spectrum Institute, and I thought, well, that seems logical, at least for me and how I'm understanding the field. So it's conceptually and technically not that complex. That's not the issue. But as we know, building, curating, and establishing the value of a community is obviously the big challenge here. And obviously, there are complexities grounded in international locality, and then obviously contact points. We need multi-institutional agency in order to make this happen. But we also need to recognize that graduate education is kind of an unstable and small part of a person's journey. And so that's kind of a niche area in and of itself. So what have we done? Well, we have here at Memphis developed an international database of physical education or equivalent professors in particularly 3 continents, Central, South America, Africa, and Asia. We didn't do this for North America, for Europe, and for Australasia because we are more aware of the individuals engaged with spectrum-related research in those areas, such as people engaged in this call, but also we know people within the literature. We've spent some time communicating with international stakeholders, sending emails, meeting with folks in different continents, but also sharing flyers and kind of developing kind of Google Forms or kind of Qualtrics surveys, which we're trying to identify potential people that would be interested in learning more about the spectrum. I've also connected with a couple of PE and non-PE based organizations. So ASET, for example, I know they are doing what they can to do a lot of work to support graduate students. Phase, for example, which is a practitioner-focused conference in Asia, for example. And I think I've started the journey of identifying potential local experts who would be interested in leading this work within different continents. But again, that's still a challenge. In terms of the research, I think I've made most progress in this area, partly because it's much easier to do the conceptual research compared to that of building a community. And so, as you'll see, we've got one manuscript which is very close to being published. It's this first one, Philosophizing Spectrum Theory. I've presented on that in the past, which is all about exploring how the relationship between the spectrum and how we can link that to ancient philosophies, grounded in, for example, the work of Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle to promote pedagogies of truth, justice, and flourishing. But I'm also writing about these other areas, and I can kind of unpack them a bit later if necessary. But I do think that I've done a lot of theory-heavy work, and I now need to kind of work on some practitioner papers, which unpack that further. Let's look at some of the progress and then challenges that I've seen as well. Okay. So looking at the service then, again, this is a 3-year project. We've begun the process of really promoting and developing Spectrum International Graduate Student Association. We've started to develop some of the bones within the skeleton, so I think that's good and that's healthy. But the challenge is that it's not yet, I've not kind of officially launched it yet. But I don't think we're quite there in terms of interest, in terms of focus. I've also recognized that in my work in this area and connecting with other institutions, there are actually a lot of institutions that are trying to do this work or similar work as it relates to graduate students that are espousing kind of potentially different interests or similar interests. And subsequently, it kind of gives me reason to pause a little bit because I don't want to take over or kind of get in the way of other initiatives held by potentially the Spectrum Institute or institutes located externally of the spectrum. And it's difficult too, because some institutes care about particular things. Some are very broad. In this context, it's very much aligned with the spectrum theory and the paradigm of research. Obviously, the challenge too, which I've increasingly learned as well, is that obviously the realm of graduate studentship is complex, short, and fleeting. You know, so many students can potentially claim interest in the spectrum and for a period of time, and then they will graduate, go on to teach in schools, or they'll potentially develop other interests. And so that's been quite a challenge. And then I'm obviously as well looking into how do I navigate the building of a graduate student association that is considerate of local agency, considerate of local interests, is cognizant of language barriers. And obviously the idea is that I don't want to do anything that indirectly competes with other activities that are going on within the spectrum or by spectrum scholars as well. In terms of research, again, I think we've made good progress here. So we've got one manuscript which is about to come out in a journal near you, 2 manuscripts which are about to be submitted. And I think there is significant value, interest, and appetite for playing with the theory. And I think that needs to be unpacked further. I think, again, for a long time, we've taken the theory for granted, which I think has been really good, and it's stood the test of time. But what we need to do moving forward is to continue unpacking that and making that relevant for local communities, for local educators. So the challenge is obviously theory-heavy work is obviously challenging for practitioners. It's more aligned and suited for teacher educators and researchers. And I think the challenge that I found too is I do a lot of this work in isolation, which makes it challenging to kind of expand the scope and reach of this work as well as its impact. And then looking at kind of some of the next steps as well. So I think for me, when kind of understanding that this is a 3-year project, I need to kind of reflect and recalibrate. I need to kind of reflect on both the service and research activities and aspirations explored. There is both value in I think the service-oriented initiative and the research initiative, but it's very challenging to do both at the same time. And I think, at least for me, I need to acknowledge opportunities for growth in terms of my agency, but also I need to explore what are the next steps. I think it's fair to say that if there's a long-term project, the goals, the aspirations, the aims will develop over time every year, potentially as a result of the learning that happens. So that's why I think it's really important that as in this period, I'm exploring possible next steps and I'm getting assistance from the Spectrum community as well. My idea is also I want to meet with the Spectrum board to kind of report on some of the specific findings, opportunities and complexities, and potentially present some alternative and develop proposals for continuing the project, refining the project in ways that are aligned with the Spectrum Institute's interests. And then again, a final goal for me is to connect with more Spectrum experts internationally, locally, regionally, to kind of expand on how we do this work. A service-oriented initiative and a research-oriented initiative require two different kind of skill sets and both require different forms of agency. That's it. In terms of my presentation, I know it's a little bit different to how I usually approach presentations. But hopefully that gives you an insight into the reflections, progress, and challenges of a 3-year project.
Thank you, Jamie. So, any question or suggestion?
Jamie, how frustrating has this process been with this project? Because it's very large. There are multiple perspectives that you're looking at, as you've already identified. Is it still doable? Is it something that you perceive that is going to, at some point here, you're actually going to perceive that you're making an impact?
I think it has been challenging, potentially frustrating in part, but more so just it's been a learning journey. Particularly, I think some communities of practice, especially in, for example, North America, are well established. In Europe, there are communities where there are people doing this work. I think that what I'm learning is that I think potentially this like the service-oriented agency and graduate student associations need to be grounded within the local context first and foremost, and then be connected to a broader institution, as opposed to begin at the big scale kind of broader institution, or begin in one location and then expand out. I think they need to kind of potentially begin more organically within the nations with which and the continents with which this work is possible. So I think that's been a learning journey. Has it stunted my motivation for doing this work? Not really. I still think that building community is probably one of the most important ways we can kind of elevate the spectrum, especially from a pluralistic way of understanding the act of teaching and learning. So for me, I think potentially one of my ideas is maybe to hone in a little bit and maybe to focus more on potentially the continent that I'm based, North America. And maybe that may be something where I can kind of recalibrate and see more success, potentially aligned with the original aspirations. But I need to reflect on that. And my goal is to, I think, come back to the board and say, this is how I'd like to change things. This is how I think potentially in understanding the scope of the project? Could it be further honed, or what advice do I need to improve it, for example? So just engaging with all those thoughts. It's challenging because we have developed databases. We have identified who are the researchers and practitioners and teacher educators of physical education in 3 separate continents. So we've communicated with these people, but still it's quite challenging, especially because, we're in such a busy time professionally, but then also there are personal complexities going on as well.
Right.
So Jamie, you
Thanks,
and I
Jamie.
talked about versions of things you're doing like this, like getting graduate students together for like a mini conference, or bringing them in for training, having them go to schools together to demonstrate, or to see demonstrations of the spectrum being used, in schools. And I think all that's really, really valuable, because graduate students or future teachers or future teacher educators, having a reference point of seeing these things done in person is extremely important for understanding what the spectrum is and how it is used, right? But to your point of what Mark brought up, in order for us to do that, we need 2 things: time and resources. So how do we achieve that? How do we achieve the impact we're trying to have, or what you're doing with your work, without getting more time and more resources? Or do you have plans for that?
I think there is knowledge located outside of our current scope of the field, which is really helpful to this point. There's in the medical education, especially when it comes to education of physicians, they do a lot of work called instructional rounds, and they've developed these really high quality methods of essentially bringing a select group of people locally, regionally, nationally into a community, helping an institution or engage with a problem of practice, or the community that comes together working themselves on a problem of practice, which they are engaging with an institution to help work around. I think there is scope for us doing a lot of local work in schools, where potentially a component of spectrum education is that we are introducing students to the spectrum. Conceptually, we're giving them practical examples, for example, but potentially a component of their training is that they maybe spend, I don't know, a couple of days as a group going into a local school or local schools, observing teachers who have been potentially trained in the spectrum or not, where they are observing the spectrum, which styles are possible, which styles are teachers using, in a plethora of arenas, classroom-based subjects or in physical education. In developing ways for them to understand the styles from a very kind of a communal aspect, and then subsequently having them to develop localized knowledge within that community about what is possible, what is doable, how do I understand reciprocal style, for example. That's one way of doing this. I think developing the ability to do this work locally is really important. So maybe even if it's like we recreate a structure or a model of what does a spectrum walk look like, and we provide that out to members of the spectrum community who can then replicate that experience within their own teacher education programs with local schools. That's one way. But obviously the time and the resource challenge is obviously always going to be there when doing this kind of work.
No, yeah, of course. And I think it's what's continued to limit those of us doing research in this area and in the broader PE community. What time do we have to be innovative? We're regurgitating a lot of work because our systems in place and our descriptions of what we do for our job are really lack flexibility, and it limits our ability to be more innovative and achieve like things that you want to do. And I also think you spoke to something that maybe, if I could provide a comment of thought, is I think we I think we've got to think bigger than the spectrum, because the things that you're talking about, the spectrum is a central focus purpose. If you think of it like an archery target, the spectrum is at the very center. But truly having the time to understand the context, understand the characteristics of the teachers, their value systems, the things that are at play, that's always going to limit to what degree graduate students or teachers are utilizing the spectrum, which means a broader understanding of that, which takes time, and research needs to coincide with the spectrum as opposed to being separate, where we learn about the spectrum, oh, then we learn about the teachers, then we learn about some, like you're talking about that integration. But fantastic work, and keep it up. You're doing great. So thanks for letting me comment.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Kelly. Thank you, Jamie. No more questions? Okay, if there aren't more questions, we will finish this session. So thank you very much to the speakers and the audience for attending. I hope you can attend for the conference. It is going to be on the 5th to 8th of May in Asian Olympia in Greece. So Nikos, I don't know, or Mark, if you give some information or before finish, any
Well,
update?
thank you, Maria. I'll just need to greet everybody and thank everybody for their participation, and also the presenters for their interesting topics they presented and thoughts. It's really important to gather somewhere, even online, but it would be even more important, I think, if we can gather somewhere, live. And this is, the rationale of organizing that conference in ancient Olympia. I hope that many of you will be able to be there, and we are just counting days. For those of you who will not be able to attend, no matter the reason, we will try to have a streamline through YouTube channel, but we will let you know when ready for these details. In case you are coming in ancient Olympia and you have any type of questions, please do not hesitate to contact with us directly. Thank you very much, and see you.
Thank you, Nico.
Thank you.
So thank you again to everybody and have a good day.